Honourable members, prayers. Almighty God, we humbly beseech Thee to look with favour upon this Parliament of the Republic of Ghana. Grant that it may perform its high duty as in Thy sight. Give divine guidance to the President of the Republic, Thou members of Parliament and ministers of state with discernment and vision, integrity and courage, that through the labours of government, this land and people may be well and truly served, and Thy good purposes for the common human life be realized in our midst. O God, grant us a vision of our country, fair as it might be, country of righteousness, where none shall wrong his neighbour, country of plenty, where evil and poverty shall be done away with, country of brotherhood, where all success shall be founded on service and honour shall be given to the deserving, country of peace, where government shall rest on the will of the people and the love for the common good. Bless the efforts of those who struggle to make this vision a living reality. Inspire and strengthen our people that they may give time, thought, and sacrifice to speed the day of the coming beauty of Ghana and Africa. Amen. Honourable members, we commence with the correction of the votes and proceedings of the 13th sitting held on Wednesday, March 16, 2022. Page 1, page 2, page 3, page 4, page 5, page 6, page 7, page 8, page 9, page 10, page 11, page 12, page 13, page 14, page 15, page 16, page 17, page 18, page 19, page 20. Honourable members, in the absence of any corrections, the votes and proceedings of Wednesday, March 16, 2022 is hereby adopted as a true record of proceedings. Honourable members, we have one official report. The official report of Tuesday, March 1st, 2022. Any corrections, please? Any corrections? Very well. In the absence of any corrections, the official report of Tuesday, March 1st, 2022 is hereby adopted as a true record of proceedings. Item 5 of the other paper on page 3. Urgent questions. Yes, Honourable Chief Whip, your minister here. Very well. Yes, the first one, To be answered by the Honorable Minister for Health. Yes. Question 5A. In the name of the Honorable Member for Ketu North, James Kluche Abeji. Honorable Deputy Leader, you may please ask your question.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise to ask the Minister for Health how many magnetic resonance imaging MRI machines are functional in government hospitals throughout the country, and what steps is the ministry taking to increase the number of MRIs in the country? Thank you.
Yes, Honorable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, government hospitals under the Ministry of Health actually has 7 of these magnetic resonance imaging equipments. And there are 3 in what we call quasi-government hospitals. Just because when it comes to functionality, there are only 4 out of these 7 which are functional now, belonging to the state. University of Ghana Medical Center, Kolebu Teaching Hospital, Konfanochi Teaching Hospital, which has been down for the past 1 week, awaiting replacement of a defect which the hospital has ordered through the local agent, Canon. Then Greater Accra Regional Hospital, the RICH. This is also functional. The non-functional ones are located. One in Tamale Teaching Hospital has been down since 2016. Mr. Speaker, the machine requires major repairs and multiple refilling of helium to diagnose the problems, as well as refilling of helium to cool down the magnets after the repairs. The proposals for the repairs and estimated cost of repair does not convince the ministry of its success after committing the funds required for the repairs. Quotations received is not also economic. So the best and economic option is replacement. Mr. Speaker, we've had an experience with the one in Kumasi. That got down sometime last 2 years. We battled and found some money to repair it. It's quite expensive. It is down again. So the doctors and the biomedical engineers are advising that these machines should rather be replaced instead of continuous repairs. That costs a bit of money. There is also one in Hope Teaching Hospital, which has been down since 2015. The same story on repairs. There's another one in Cape Coast Teaching Hospital. Mr. Speaker, unfortunately, this one never worked, even after installation in 2014. I've been there to see the machine myself some time back when I started touring the regions around 2018. The building that was even put there had started cracks and things like that. So we are thinking of replacing the one in also Ho Teaching Hospital. When we talk about the quasi-government hospitals, Mr. Speaker, these are hospitals owned by government organizations like Bank of Ghana, Ghana Commercial Bank, Cocoa Board, Maritime, though it's government, but they are not under the purview of the Ministry of Health. They sit under the supervision and purview of the boards of these corporates. That is why we call them quasi-government hospitals. But we do collaborate with them for health statistics and support. We pack bags anytime we are in need. Mr. Speaker, we are planning to actually increase the numbers of MRIs this way. Some of the new regional hospitals under development are going to be equipped with MRI scanners. And they include Sewa Regional Hospital in the Ashanti region, Tema Regional Hospital, which will quite soon see a very huge investment for refurbishment. Evacuation Regional Hospital, that is also undergoing redevelopment project, and the new regional hospital near Agunan Kwanta in the Western region. These 6 new regional hospitals are to be constructed under the Agenda 111. Will also include MRI machines. The 6 new hospitals in the new regions will also be given MRI machines. And as part of the retooling of regional hospitals, some of the current regional hospitals will be considered for MRI installation, as well as replacement of the 3 obsolete, let me use that harsh word, obsolete MRIs at Tamale Teaching Hospital, Cape Coast Teaching Hospital, and Trafalgar, which is now the whole teaching hospital. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Yes, Honorable.
Thank you, Right Honorable Speaker. Honorable Speaker, I want to thank the Honorable Minister for the answer. Now, according to the Minister, we have 7 MRI machines throughout the whole country. That's government, in government facilities. And 3 of them are down, 4 are functioning. Even the 4, the one at Konfanoche is also down, which means that effectively only 3 that are functioning. What is delaying the repair of these machines that are down? What is delaying the repair of these machines?
Yes, Honorable.
Just unfortunately, I couldn't get the key word in the supplementary question. What is the repair, the nature of the repair of the machine? Mr. Speaker, I've been taking through a very serious biomedical engineering lecture on the repairs of these machines. And since I couldn't pick them offhand, I even tried to let them give me a write-up. It's quite technical. Mr. Speaker, the machines are fitted and they come with what they call chillers, not even air conditioners. So that initially they were fitting 1 chiller per each of these machines. Then the machine started misbehaving. So they advised a second chiller so that the temperature in the room where the machine sits will be very seriously controlled. Why so? The machine works with helium filling. Helium is a gas. That actually makes the magnet in it give better pictures. Now, when the temperature in the room changes a little bit to a certain level, the helium begins to decay, radioactive activity in the helium gas. And when it decays to a certain level, the machine stops functioning. To repair it, you need to refill first to start it, before you can do diagnosis of what is even wrong with the machine. And when that is done, and it's a part that is born of something that you have to do, they do it before they refill again for the machine to start working. So ideally, by virtue of our power situation in the country, the chillers at times don't have power to work with. At times, power that is getting in there misbehaves, no quality power. So the outages of electricity and the poor quality of energy actually makes the chillers not very, very, very effective. So we see a situation where helium begins to leak out of the system, and then it goes down, down, down and that is it. Was it Who also, when I joined the ministry, Who and Kumasi, we were testing the levels of helium quite frequently, and they detected that they were going down. We were looking for quotations, and Canon will come and give us a quotation, and the hospital will say it's quite expensive, they cannot pay. So we were battling, especially with Who, until eventually Who also gave way. So that is the situation that we have. So the nature of repairs is refailing to diagnose and refailing to let it work. And when they find a part that's not very well, they confirm not one. They have now ordered a part that is coming very soon for them to put in there and refill for the machine to start working again. So that is the situation.
Yes. The answer given by the minister seems to me that he has given up. There is nothing he can do. So, and the challenges that he enumerated, those challenges, I believe, are affecting the private sector as well. But there are private owners of these machines where patients are referred to for the imaging to be done. Why is it that the private sector is able to maintain their machines and we in the public sector, we cannot do? Mr. Speaker, is those factors not affecting the private sector as well? And why are they doing it, but we are not doing it?
Yes. Mr. Speaker, this question is a bit difficult for me to answer. Why? Because I don't know the type of MRIs in the private facilities. I've been told that there are two types, the one that works with helium and the one that works with hot magnet or whatever they call it. So if a private sector person has bought that one, that I don't know. It will be difficult for me to explain why they are functional and why ours are not functional. In fact, the ministry is advising that this type of machine should not be bought again, because maintaining it is quite expensive and we do routine maintenance despite whatever situation it is like. So they are advising that we change from this helium-based magnetic resonance imaging machine to another type, which will not give us this type of challenges. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The minister also mentioned the effort the ministry is making to increase the number, even though the existing ones that cannot be repaired. The effort to increase the number, and he mentioned other hospitals. Can the minister give us timeline? That those machines, the MRI can be provided in those hospitals, so that patients go to the hospitals, they are not referred. Sometimes patients who is weak need to be carried into a vehicle to the private areas for those imaging to be conducted. If we have them in the hospital, the patient movement will be restricted. What timeline will the minister give to us so that we will be assured that patients go to those hospitals, and if they need a service of the MRI, it can be conducted at the hospital? Thank you.
Yes. No, Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I think I have said in this chamber over and over and over again that things that are exogenous to my environment will be difficult for me to give timelines. My timelines will depend on resources. I've mentioned that whole Tamale and Cape Coast are to be replaced. If I don't have a budgetary allocation for these, Mr. Speaker, we cannot definitely use IGFs from this facility to replace them. So if I come and stand here and give timelines and the finance minister doesn't give me the resources, I will be lying to the chamber. So I don't believe giving timelines to come and face assurances committee and things like that. So it will be difficult for me. The new ones, I said, will be put in the new hospitals that we are building. And not until these are completed, definitely we can put them in there. So that is a challenge. But you know what, for who? The existing hospitals. We are looking for resources as part of our plan.
Honorable Minister, What does not come through the mic, you can ignore it.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you for your advice. Speaker, this was a friendly bullet, so.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this matter is of great concern to a lot of Ghanaians, and there are a lot of work that I'm aware done in this regard for efficient utilization of resources. Has this occurred to the minister that people or experts are discussing the possibility of the government, going into a lease agreement with the private sector to lease these machines to the various health facilities, so that they take care of even the repair and maintenance of these, whilst you can have these services throughout over a longer period, without necessarily thinking of purchasing an outright thing and then having difficulty in maintaining these facilities. Has this really come to your notice, and why don't you go along that path instead of looking for money to buy when you don't even have?
Yes.
Mr. Speaker, with your indulgence, this particular comment, I will call it comment, doesn't look like a question, but a good comment that can be considered. So I'll get back to my technocrats for us to look at the economic viability of this suggestion. And if I can get approvals to do this, we may visit that option. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Okay. My friend Dahi.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, from the answer given by the Honourable Minister, it is clear that we have serious problems with regards to MRI services in the country. Because he said that the one at the Tamale Teaching Hospital is not working. And if I heard him right, he also said the one at Konfanotri, which will serve the people from the Western North and his own region, is not also working. And he said that it will be too expensive to even repair those that has been spoiled, and that he will opt for procuring new ones. My question is, have you initiated the processes to procure new ones? And if you have, when should those facilities expect a replacement of MRI machines in those facilities? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Yes.
Mr. Speaker, if you don't have resources, you cannot initiate procurement processes. So it is part of our plan. We are asking for resources, and when these become available, we'll work on it. The one in Kumasi that is close to you, right, we've ordered a part that will soon arrive for us to reinstate that machine. So you will get services quite soon from Konfanochi Teaching Hospital. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. But we have some private facilities in Kumasi that have got MRIs, so services there can also be utilized. Thank you. Who, me?
Yes, Bawku.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. When the...
Is it not?
He said Bawa. Since when did you become Bawa?
Sit down.
When the minister was responding to the question, he indicated that there's one in the Tamale Teaching Hospital which is non-functional since 2016. And I realized that from Upper East, all the 5 regions in the north, you take Bro and Hafo, that belt, there's no single one there. And even with the government hospitals, it is so expensive. Just 3 days ago, I had to subject my child to an MRI test, and I had to pay 1,500 Ghana cedis, even in Accra here. So assuming that you come from that belt, how would you access this, particularly if you cannot move? So what effort is the ministry doing to at least either replace the one at the Tamale Teaching Hospital or repair it. For this 5 years, or this 6 or 7 years, since that one went non-functional.
Mr. Speaker, apart from planning, the only effort we are making is looking for resources that we are actively doing. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Yes, Honorable Kodo.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm grateful to the minister that he came to inaugurate the whole teaching hospital. But since then, 3 years hence, this equipment that we are talking about isn't there. There isn't any MRI equipment there. I want to find out from him. He's talking about resources, whether he will prioritize the equipping of the whole teaching hospital with that equipment.
Honorable Bodo, please ask your own question. Don't tag your personal. Yes. Your community program to somebody's question.
Mr. Speaker, in the minister's response, he referred to the Tema General Hospital as the regional hospital in Tema. For the records, I want to be sure the Tema General Hospital is now a regional hospital, and whether he is confirming that they have MRI facility there. Thank you.
Yes, Honorable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, my colleague's question was not very clear. If you can probably repeat the question.
In your answer, you referred to Tema General Hospital as the Tema Regional Hospital. And I want that clear in the records. And to also indicate whether you have MRI at the Tema General Hospital.
Mr. Speaker, we refer to Tema Regional Hospital as a health region. Administratively, Tema is not a region, but we have identified it as a region, such that because of population and the outlying areas, we will treat Tema General Hospital as a regional hospital, so that things that we put in regional hospitals can also be extended to Tema. That is why we call it Tema Regional Hospital. It's undergoing refurbishment. A contract has been awarded, and we are going to see a new Tema Regional Hospital that will actually have an MRI equipment. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Yes, Chief Whip.
Speaker, I'm aware the challenges associated with not just the provision of MR, but the maintenance is something that is associated with third world countries. It's a huge concern. But because of our situation as a country, I want to suggest to the minister, if he finds it appropriate, to consider probably focusing on cluster of health centers, so that the volume of MRR that we have to provide, and of course the cost of maintenance, could be reduced. So then we are focusing on a cluster of health centers. If that is something that he finds appealing, it's something that he will want to consider going forward.
Yes, Honorable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, that is noted, but I just want to re-echo that has been the strategy over years. That is how come we put in MRIs in teaching hospitals, so all the outlying facilities will have that particular, equipment for treatment. So when we put them in the regions, it is like a cluster of hospitals in the region will assess that one. So that has been the strategy, and I will continue to deepen that strategy when we get resources to procure MRIs. Thank you.
Now I will. All right, I'll give the last one to Okujeto before I come to leadership. When the question was asked, you were not even in the chamber. Honorable Okujeto, please.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, I want to find out from the Honorable Health Minister, in an earlier response to Honorable Ahid, you indicated that there is really no funding and you are now looking for funds to initiate procurement. Considering that MRIs are vital equipment, have you explored the possibility of an emergency solution relying on the contingency vote that this House always approves? I know that, for example, 2022, the contingency vote increased from 186 to 186 million in 2021 to 933 million in 2022. For emergency situations such as this, have you considered that option, since this is about life, it's about our health, and it can happen to any of us at any time? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Yes.
Mr. Speaker, my answer will be no, because I haven't ever thought that ministers can actually go to the finance ministry and suggest that because this is an emergency or urgent, let us use contingency to do that. But if in the wisdom of Parliament, after me exposing what we have and the challenges we're facing with those services, Parliament will recommend to the finance minister to give the resources from the contingency vote, I will be happier and thank Parliament for that. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Yes, Honorable.
Right, Mr. Speaker, we thank our colleague, the Minister, for the answers. Having listened to him and the challenges, would he consider the fact that in the negotiations to buy MRIs, as a country will make a deliberate decision that we procure from only certain suppliers whose services can be accessed even after the sales? Currently, we have too many of these machines from too many suppliers, and once they sell and go, we are unable to get the support. Secondly, Mr. Speaker, can the ministry consider having to take a life cycle decision on the machines so that we can even buy insurance on them for the period we want to use them? So when they get spoiled within that period, the supplier or the manufacturer would repair them. Because, Mr. Speaker, it is actually not viable to have an MRI machine when you don't have the capacity to maintain them. Like he's saying rightly, if it breaks down, you still need to pay a lot of thousands of dollars to fill the helium gas, even to test whether it is appropriate. And after testing, if it's condemned, you have wasted your money. So two things. Can we consider as a country that certain brands whose services we can access after the sale, because many of them don't have local agents? And two, whether we should consider that when we buy them over a period and extend the warranty by extended warranty. So if we say we want this machine to function for 7 years or 10 years, buy 10 years warranty. So within that period, it may cost more at the beginning, but within that 10 years, you know that whatever happens to the machine, we will get the after sales services, and to keep these machines working for the period we want them before we replace them. Because finding money to buy new one is the easiest part, but how they last 3, 4, 5 years is the most difficult part, Mr. Speaker.
Yes.
Mr. Speaker, I also treat this as a very good comment, and this type of strategy will be considered in future. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Very well. The next one, 5B, it's in the name of the Honorable Member for Akan, Yagomado.
Mr. Speaker, thanks for the opportunity. I rise to ask the Minister for Health when the ministry will resume spraying the Dodofie electoral area and other places along the river Asukoko, River Wawa, Dodi Papasi, and Jamoma areas to alleviate the people of black flies or buffalo gnats bite, as well as provide them with onchocerciasis medication.
Yes, Honorable Minister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, following the notification from the district and regional surveillance, together with the concern of the National Security Coordinator on the above subject, a team from the national level, the Neglected Tropical Disease Program, was dispatched to the OT region to support the district and regional teams. The objective was to investigate the black fly nuisance problem and its impact on the people dotted along the river basins. Mr. Speaker, the team interacted with all 8 district health directorates, the affected communities, members of district assemblies, and visits to known and potential black fly breeding sites to ascertain the viability of the breeding sites. Mr. Speaker, though the black flies were present at the time of our visit, the members were not that much due. The numbers of the flies were not that much due to the low water levels at the time, since the population of the flies is dependent on the amount of availability of water. Most seasonal rivers had dried up when we visited, except the perennial rivers that had some water flowing. The few pools of water at Dodofie had stagnated and not flowing at the time of the visit, and this followed a similar pattern along the river courses. Mr. Speaker, the team had interactions with the presiding member of the Karachi East Municipal Assembly, Mr. Emmanuel Lazi, who described the impact of the biting nuisance affecting effective farming by the indigents. Mr. Speaker, aerial spraying of the black flies, led by WHO, was undertaken in Ghana and 10 other onco-endemic countries for 28 years, spanning between 1974 and 2002, at most river basins, including the Asukoko and Wawa rivers, to reduce prevalence of onchocerciasis. With the introduction of ivermectin, a cost-effective, safe, affordable, and effective drug, WHO recommended the use of mass drug administration for member states as the main cost-effective intervention for the control of onchocerciasis. So invariably, WHO recommended suspension of aerial spray for us to get to tablets that was cost-effective and affordable, safe, and effective. Ghana has been doing several rounds of the mass drug administration in the endemic districts on an annual basis. WHO recommendations further include the wearing of long and protective clothing, particularly when outside, to minimize the bites from the flies. Mr. Speaker, a nationwide evaluation conducted in 2017 revealed a low prevalence of the disease below the WHO threshold of 0.1%, which gave rise to the need to conduct a survey to test the feasibility of stopping even the mass drug administration in the whole enclave this year. This survey has been planned to commence in June 2022. Subsequent to that, MDAs was temporarily suspended in order not to have the survey results interfere with the drug intake. Drug distributions will resume only if the survey results that the mass drug administration cannot be stopped if the infection levels are above the WHO threshold of 0.1%. So we have temporarily held on until the survey is completed, so that if our outcome is more than the WHO recommended level, they will resume administration of the mass drug activity. Mr. Speaker, With this background, the following actions are to be taken. I have recommended that district assemblies are to collaborate with the Environmental Protection Agency and the Environmental Health offices at the assemblies to larvicide the breeding sites during such peak periods of black fly bites and nuisance. So that will not be area spraying, but the normal larviciding like we do with the mosquito spraying in pockets of areas where we find as places for breeding. These assemblies are to support the district health directorates, sensitize communities on the need to wear protective clothing at all times, and the use of pharmaceutical products or any local remedies by the indigents that repels the black flies. Mr. Speaker, the neglected tropical disease program is closely working with the OT regional health directorates and entomologists to monitor the situation. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Yes, Honorable
Mr. Speaker, I thank the Minister for his response. It's surprising the information is given out now, whilst the people at the affected areas are complaining about these bites. That what he's saying is the fact on the ground now. But I'm trying to find out, even though the effect of the bite is no longer harmful, but what he's saying, the sensation bite is unbearable. Would his ministry consider the periodic spraying project as it used to be?
Sir, did you get him?
As one of the recommendations, we are saying that the assemblies should liaise with the regional and district directorates for health to do some spraying at breeding grounds. And I think the assembly should take it up. If we get information from our district and regional offices for support, we will look at what we can do, probably with meager resources that we actually do have. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Yeah. Mr. Speaker, thank you. I have no more further questions for the Minister.
Very well. We'll move on to item 6. Yes.
The Speaker, in the answer provided by the Minister, he mentioned 8 districts that he is considering
Actually, I was going to discharge him when I saw Buem on his feet. Yes, I'll give you the last one.
Thank you, Speaker. The Minister mentioned 8 districts in OT region, but because they are rivers, the OT has 9 districts now. But because they are rivers, the Speaker, there's a connection to the Guam district and even to Hokwe. Whether the survey the Minister is talking about has been extended to at least that part of Volta region to be assured that the situation is different in that area. Because as you are aware, Hokwe used to host a center for onchocerciasis treatment because of the prevalence of that situation there. Thank you.
Yes.
Mr. Speaker, I have to get back to my technocrats to look at the geographic situation my colleague has come up with. I don't know that area very, very well, and it will be difficult for me to try to look at what you are talking. But I will send a sentiment to them to see what is there. But what actually happens when we have health issues like this and we identify districts? We don't work only in the districts, but we go into the immediate outlying districts because diseases can spread across such areas. And I'm very much sure that even before I get there, they will tell you that those parts have been included in the survey samples that they are doing. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable Minister, we thank you for attending upon the House to answer questions. Now you're formally discharged. Item 6. statements. Yes, Honorable Chief Whip.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I want to crave your indulgence and that of the House using Order 72 to raise a matter of public importance. And Mr. Speaker, it has to do with the current situation in Bawku. Mr. Speaker, the difficulties are that pictures coming and news items going around is a bit worrying and very disturbing. And as a House, in fact, even our colleagues from the enclave are scared to be heard talking about it because of the delicate nature of what is happening there. And some brutalities that is being said to be happening as of this morning in that enclave. I thought that, Mr. Speaker, as a House, we should be interested to get the Ministers of Interior, Defense, and National Security, even if it is a closed sitting, where they can brief this House, for us to know exactly what are some of the things that are happening and what steps is being taken to help manage the difficulties. I know the conflict is a very long, outstanding issues, but the current happening is not very healthy for us. And I want to crave your indulgence, Mr. Speaker, that if we can get these ministers to come and brief the House, so that at least the House is versed with what is happening and what steps they are taking. Because, Mr. Speaker, there's even some accusation about the personnel that are there, the officers that have been sent there, belonging to some of the factional groups. And Mr. Speaker, if this turns out to be true, for example, you want to send troops to Aswansi, and you have the like, or some, may God forbid, something is happening in Kumasi, and then you and I are also put as part of the contingent to go there. We indirectly have interest because that's where we hail, that's where we come from, we know everything there. So when these all allegations are going on, I think it is important that we get the Ministers of Security to brief us so that at least what our colleagues from that enclave also know can be relayed to the ministers for them to see what actions they can take to help save the further escalation of the violent and mayhem that is going on there. And I thought that I needed to draw the attention of the House to this. So I'll be grateful, Mr. Speaker, if, with your indulgence, we can get the ministers to brief this House. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Yes, Honorable Member for Kankwe Central.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, not too long ago, I think the Bawku Naba paid a courtesy call on the President, I think sometime in January. And the President gave him the assurance of the government support and the security that is required by people in and around Bawku. Bawku is a very busy place, very commercial. I know that a new military setup or barracks is being put up there. But recent developments from Bawku is not encouraging at all, especially after the meeting with the President, the meeting between the President and the Bawku Naba. We all know the history behind this conflict, and I think the call by the Minority Chief Whip is welcoming. It requires the Minister for the Interior and Defense, as well as the National Security Minister, to brief the House, especially having read this morning that 3 soldiers were even shot. It's very dangerous, and it is very, very important that we invite them to brief the House, Mr. Speaker. Thank you very much.
Yes.
Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, thank you very much for the opportunity to add to the call of the Minority Chief Whip for us as a House to be briefed on this matter. Mr. Speaker, just a while ago, I was on one of the TV stations on Metro TV, and this matter came up for discussion. And Mr. Speaker, my phones have not stopped ringing since after the discussion. And I am getting calls from people who represent the different views that have led to the conflict in the area. And it gives me the indication that it is such a serious matter that we should not joke with it as a country, and which better organization than the Parliament of Ghana should be leading in finding a solution, even if it is a temporary one, as we speak. Mr. Speaker, for example, the issue involving the shooting of the soldiers. My fear was that it could even have a relationship with what is happening in Burkina Faso and people coming in and rebels and all of that. But the indication I got after the show is that, in fact, the citizens themselves are complaining that sometimes these soldiers or army officers who are put there to provide security themselves, in some cases by some conduct, have become even a threat to the security situation. They go into homes, they search homes, and when they find even a cutlass, they begin to harass, residents of the place. They make them pay some monies in some cases before they are allowed, to go. And it tells you that it's a cocktail. Yes, it's a cocktail of issues that we have to be briefed adequately with, and we all can see how we can contribute to bringing down tension in that area. We all know that it's a historical dispute that has led to, recurrent conflicts every now and then. But the current situation requires urgent attention, and I wish to support the Minority Chief Whip's call that the ministers responsible for security be brought to this House to brief us and also perhaps take views based on our interactions with the people from us. That will inform whatever strategy will be used moving forward to de-escalate the tension in the area. I thank you for the opportunity.
Yes,
Speaker, I think I share in the worries of colleagues, and also not to overflog the matter is an important concern that all of us have to discuss and find a lasting solution. But it will be remiss on my part if I don't commend the Minister for Interior based on what I know. Had it not been some good intervention, probably the situation would have gotten out of hand. So to that extent, I want to commend the Minister. But be it as it may, what it means is that there is still a concern, and we cannot leave this matter to die naturally. So I'm totally in support, except to say that this is, as we know, we've dealt with such matters before in this House, where based on Speaker's directive, some committees or selected group of us have been charged to work in this direction. So we should tread cautiously, go on that tangent, and probably, Speaker, at your directive, we invite the ministers to come and have more of a closed-door briefing where we can strategically put together plans. Yes, we commend the President for his reassuring words, which is what a father of our nation should do. This is not a time for us to get too overly sensitive to this matter, but this is a time for us to do more of a sober reflection and find a lasting solution. It's been a volatile situation for some time now, and it had been good leadership of the Honorable Ambrose Derry. That is why the thing hasn't gotten out of hand. But not to repeat myself, I will support the call, but we should tread cautiously and do more of a closed-door briefing and strategically plan on how to deal with it. So, total support for the call, and it has to be quick, and it must be immediate. Speaker, I thank you for this space.
Well, yes, I agree, but do we need all the three ministers? I think the Minister for National Security oversees all the security agencies, and therefore The Minister for National Security briefing the House will be sufficient. All the others can feed into the report he gives the House. What do you think? Please, I'm dealing with the leaders. I'm not opening this one up. Forgive me. Yes.
Mr. Speaker, whereas I agree perfectly with you that the National Security Minister sits and chairs the security meetings of this minister. But remember, the Defense Minister and Interior Minister are also our colleagues. And because soldiers and police are all involved, it is my belief that if the three of them are around, because if we were going to be certain that our police will be in the House as members of Parliament for either Honorable Ambrose or then inviting only the National Security Minister will suffice. But just to be sure that they are around to also pick some of the comments that's going, I think it would be most appropriate if we are able to invite the three of them. Since the two already are supposed to be here, but just for the avoidance of that, they are present to listen to some of the concerns that may come up. Instead of the National Security Minister taking the briefing and probably later briefing them, I think it would be more useful. Thank you very much, Speaker.
Yes.
Speaker, I was speaking the same vein, mainly because of the fluidity of the matter and the fact that all three of them should be seen to be playing a complementary role. I would be in total agreement with the suggestion that we get all the three to work together. So I'm in support of the latter suggestion.
Very well. In the circumstance, I direct that the Minister for National Security, with the assistance of the Minister for Defense and Interior, do brief the House urgently on the security situation in Bawku. I so direct. Yes.
Speaker, with respect, your good self have admitted two statements. One stands in the name of the Honorable Sylvester Cheche, and I'm reliably informed there's been another one in the name of the Honorable Bawku. So if you may allow the two members to deliver their statement, probably starting from the Honorable Sylvester Cheche, followed by the Honorable Bawku. Speaker, with your leave.
Which one is by the Honorable Sylvester? I have a horde of statements here.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Very well. You may read your statement, yes.
Yes. Mr. Speaker, thank you for the opportunity to present a statement on the plight of persons living with disability in accessing healthcare in Ghana. Mr. Speaker, the right to access healthcare services is encapsulated in quite a number of important international documents which have been ratified by our country, Ghana. Of importance are Article 12 of the International Covenant on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights, Article 25 of the Convention on the Right of Persons with Disabilities, Article 11, 12 and 14 of the Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, and lastly, Article 25 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which places emphasis on the importance of health as an absolute right of an individual. Mr. Speaker, disability is defined as a condition of the body or mind that prevents a person from doing certain activities and limits their interaction with the world around them, which the World Health Organization has categorized around three dimensions: impairment, activity limitation, and participation restrictions. Some of the types of disabilities affect the vision, movement, thinking, mental health, communicating, and hearing. Mr. Speaker, my statement concerns mostly the disability of communicating and hearing, which we mostly refer to as deaf and dumb. The Convention on the Right of Persons with Disability document that ultimately stands out on issues relating to people with disability. In Article 1 of the Convention, this document emphatically spells out the role of the state in promoting, protecting, and ensuring the full and equal enjoyment of all human rights and fundamental freedoms, as well as the inherent dignity of all persons with disabilities. The Article 25, which focuses mainly on the role of the state to ensure their right to enjoy the highest attainable standard of health services as provided to other persons in the country, is my concern today. Mr. Speaker, despite the ratification of the goals of these international documents and some gains made to improve the livelihood of persons with disabilities in Ghana, they still face other challenges in life, especially access to quality and standard health care. According to the World Health Organization, such persons are about threefold likelihood to be denied medical care and 4 times increased likelihood to receive substandard care from health professionals. This is due to several factors such as low income, inadequate government policies targeted at persons with disability, low levels of education, lesser economic opportunities, inadequate knowledge of healthcare workers about how to interact with persons with poor infrastructure. The majority of persons with disability find themselves among families from poor homes. The financial challenges in taking care of such persons with special needs make it much more difficult for them to enjoy the quality and standard health care that they need. As a result, families with such low levels of income cannot afford to give such luxury to their relatives who are disabled. Secondly, persons with disability are less privileged when it comes to economic opportunities. They hardly get jobs that pay very well because they receive less education opportunities in our society. Only few make it to the university to pursue careers as normal people do. This creates a situation where they are unable to provide for themselves, thereby making it difficult to enjoy quality health care. The inadequate policies of government targeted at such people makes it challenging for them to enjoy quality healthcare service. Making reference to the various health policies of government, some policies don't even mention disability, and those that do mention it in a general context. Such policies, like the human resource policies and strategies for the health sector, the Ghana National Healthcare Strategy, Health Sector Staffing Norm, and the revised National Health Policy. Mr. Speaker, how many of our health professionals are able to communicate with the deaf and dumb at our hospitals, both private and public? Unfortunately, most healthcare workers have inadequate skills in sign language, making it difficult for them to interact with the deaf and dumb at our various hospitals. Mr. Speaker, we have the sign language expert on television interpreting news, parliamentary proceedings, and others, but healthcare sectors where they are most needed, we don't have them. Such experts are absent. Though we have to commend the Ministry of Health and the Ministry of Education for instituting the sign language course at various training institutions, it is certain that a semester course in sign language is not enough to acquire the skills to communicate with such persons. Unfortunately, these factors are interconnected and expose persons with disability to adverse health problems such as feather deficiencies, poor health conditions, sexual abuse, sexually transmitted infections, unplanned pregnancies, miscarriage, severity and chronicity of avoidable health conditions leading to low quality of life. Mr. Speaker, I would like to draw the attention of the House to the fact that women and young girls with this disability are the most vulnerable in our society. Many of them suffer from rape and other injustices from family and sometimes strangers, yet their inability to communicate makes it difficult for justice to be served and necessary medical attention given. I would like to refer the House to an online publication Tuesday, 21st December 2021 by Ghana Talks Radio with headline, "Father impregnates own deaf and dumb teenage daughter at Pifo in Konohu." A terrible incident that happened where a father impregnates his own daughter. Mr. Speaker, available data shows that the number of persons with disability keeps increasing. The report of the 2020 Population and Housing Census makes it evident that the increase in population growth is coupled with an increase with the number of persons living with disability in our country. For Ghana to meet its goals on the provision of the high quality and standard healthcare services for the persons with disability, we recommend, first of all, to conceive a database on persons with disability in the country. Ghana as a country stands a better chance of understanding such people in order to resolve their numerous challenges. Mr. Speaker, I recommend the Site Savers International for their work on the disability disaggregation project, which was conducted between the year 2016 and 2018 at Kintampo North District and Tano South District of the then Brong Ahafo region. Their report concluded that the collection of data on people with disability is feasible and has pragmatic benefit for the country when it comes to social economic development planning of our country. The government statistician, through the Ghana Statistical Service Department, could assess technical support from the Washington Group on disability data through our development partners in order to develop instruments and skills needed in this regard. All government policies must include persons with disability to better cater for their needs, especially the health policies in our country. The semester program for teaching sign language as a course at the various training institutions is inadequate, and the framers of the course outline must go back and develop more effective outline that will equip and help professionals with that particular skill. There should be a mandatory policy of government through the Ministry of Health demanding all health workers acquiring the skills of sign language. I would like to encourage some members to join in pushing for the Ghanaian Disability Act, which will take care of such concerns. Mr. Speaker, I thank you for the opportunity to make this statement.
Honorable Adams, before you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, for the opportunity to contribute to this statement made by our colleague, Honorable Sylvester. Indeed, Mr. Speaker, it is said that a society that does not make policy to factor the concerns of the minority is not worth celebrating. He has identified challenges that persons with disability face in terms of healthcare delivery to them. This challenge, Mr. Speaker, is in areas of physical infrastructure that even the hospital facilities that they are supposed to assess is not disability friendly. Already, even for the able persons, when you are not well, you are even threatened in accessing the facilities that we have. And Mr. Speaker, now you are talking about someone who already has a physical situation that puts a toll on him or her. We as a country must really do much more in terms of building disability-friendly health facilities. Not only that, the issue of human resource, because the patient who is seeking health care is key in the rendering of health service. You should be able to tell what it is you are feeling. You should be able to tell what it is that is happening to you, Mr. Speaker, to enable the caregiver give you appropriate care that you need.
Honorable Secretary of the Speaker to take the chair.
But because of lack of this human resource, someone who is physically challenged, possibly, like he said, a deaf and dumb person, and the medical officer who is to attend to this person cannot interpret the sign language and cannot do the appropriate sign language for the person to even understand what it is that the caregiver is asking to be done. We really, as we do in this house, where we have persons who interpret what we say to the world of persons who are challenged, must begin to think about providing such services in, if not all health facilities, at least some key health areas to help in dealing with such situations. Braille interpretation can equally be employed. so as to help these persons with disability to deal with healthcare related issues. Of course, funding has been raised that because these persons are challenged physically, quite a number of them are unable to find the necessary resources or money to pay for healthcare. We need equally to look at it beyond the national health insurance, which itself is challenged in some ways. How to fund healthcare for persons with disability. Mr. Speaker, in some areas, they consider persons with disability either as a curse or sometimes as persons who could be used for other spiritual fortification. This must equally be checked in one way or the other. I have encountered persons with disability who, Mr. Speaker, because of one form of disability that they have developed sharp skills in other areas, and they've been able to serve society so well. You go around the world, you see some of the best musicians that we have in various sectors are persons with disability. We have them in this country, we have them in many other parts of the world. Speaker, not too long ago, a person with sight disability, I don't want to say blind person, was able to land an aircraft. This is so because though he cannot see, he has developed other skills in such a sharp manner that many of us here who can see, who can hear, and are not physically challenged will dare not do. So, Mr. Speaker, it is important that in terms of providing health care for this category of persons, we take a serious look at it so we don't lose them earlier. Because if they live and live longer, they would also be able to develop their skills and serve the country so well. Can you imagine how much Steve Wonder has contributed to the economy of the world through his music, and how much many more of such physically challenged persons have contributed to the economy of the world? If we had not attended to them in their earlier life and they had passed on, would we have benefited from this? No, Mr. Speaker. That's why I joined my colleague in calling for some support and attention in this area, and congratulate him for bringing out these issues. And we must do this more often as a house to find out areas that are challenged and call the authorities to pay some attention to it. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, for the opportunity to contribute.
Yes, Honourable Member for Tema Central.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to thank the maker of the statement for the statement he's made, and even though he's restricted it to healthcare access, we'll stick to that. Mr. Speaker, today we may be healthy, strong, and fit, but tomorrow, in a domestic accident, if you hit your head on a wall, if you were involved in a car accident or a gory accident somewhere on any of our highways, Mr. Speaker, you can find yourself dumb or deaf the next morning. Mr. Speaker, the problem that our brothers and sisters that are deaf and dumb face is an issue of language. What the language that they speak or the language that they understand is sign language. I'm sure a majority of us here do not understand sign language in the same way we do not understand maybe Chinese or Swahili or Zulu. It is the language barrier that our people are facing, and that barrier must be lifted. Mr. Speaker, how do we lift this barrier? It's through education, that we invest in educating ourselves in the language that our deaf and dumb brothers and sisters would understand, which is sign language. Mr. Speaker, in Ghana today, there are private schools that teach students other foreign languages. That, in my humble view, is still part of a colonial enterprise or a new colonial enterprise. We should rather be investing in teaching our children the basic sign language, so that when they meet our unfortunate brothers and sisters that are affected by these disabilities, they'll be able to communicate. Mr. Speaker, you take our healthcare service providers. How many doctors can even understand what a deaf person is saying through sign language? So, Mr. Speaker, that barrier is what we need to target. And we need to invest in the training of trainers, teachers that have dedicated themselves to teach these disability languages, or this disability language, effectively. Mr. Speaker, it cannot be done by the state alone. Private sector must be brought on board to invest alongside the public sector. Mr. Speaker, we can go into PPP arrangements and give private sector companies that are prepared to sponsor young people to learn sign language some form of a tax rebate or tax incentives, so that we can raise resources to fund this learning of this special language. Mr. Speaker, the maker of the statement also charged us all to put our shoulder to the wheel and help promulgate a Ghanaian Disability Act, which I think it's extremely important and necessary. Mr. Speaker, with these few words, I want to thank you for this opportunity to contribute to the statement. Thank you.
Yes, honourable member, before you come in, I received a brief from members of the disabled, specifically those on deaf, that we don't use deaf and dumb at the same time. We use deaf. That's the new expression. We don't use the deaf and at the same time the dumb. So deaf connotes deaf and dumb at the same time. So take note of it.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Speaker, for this chance to contribute to the statement ably made by my colleague. Mr. Speaker, the very first house help that I employed in my house, I think about 10 years ago, happened to be deaf. And you'll be amazed about the level of intelligence that this guy can demonstrate. The only barrier happened to be the fact that he is not able to speak the way we would have, and so sometimes it saddens my heart when, because they are in the minority, society normally do not look at them properly. Mr. Speaker, it would be very appropriate if we can consider adding sign language in our school curricula and teach them right from day one some of the basic sign language of our children. Because of him, I've been able to learn some of these things, and it helps a lot sometimes when I travel outside the country, and so forth and so on. Mr. Speaker, I believe strongly that even in our churches, most of the time when the sermon is preached, they are not able to understand, so they only go to the church, just sit down and walk away. Health delivery. How will you be able to tell what he or she is saying to the doctor if the doctor is not able to understand exactly what he's saying? At the end of the day, I believe strongly that wrong medicines might be prescribed for wrong illness, and that is worrying. Mr. Speaker, I even know that our common fund portions of it are supposed to use to help these minorities in our country. And I don't know whether these things are really given attention to in our district assemblies. It is my prayer that this statement will wake us up to give attention to these people who are brothers and sisters who could, do so many things that we believe that just the fact that they are disabled in one way or the other is not inability. Mr. Speaker, I just pray that we'll give attention to them. Some of these things, even when you go to the the social services that we get in our country, we feel that they are the less considered. I mean, we don't really give attention to them. And it's worrying. And so, having heard my brother, my friend, a colleague make this statement, I just feel that I would want to add my voice and to draw attention to these people, that they are less in our society, but must be given attention in order to give them the best in life. I thank you very much. I don't intend speaking so much. God bless you for giving me the opportunity. Mr. Speaker, thank you.
Well. We move to the next statement. Honourable Member, do you want to contribute? Well, let's hear you.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, for the opportunity to contribute to this statement. I also take the opportunity and then commend the maker of the statement, Honorable Sylvester Tete. He couldn't have done it at any better time than now. Mr. Speaker, I'm also glad you drew the House attention to the fact that we shouldn't use deaf and dumb. It's better we use either the deaf or people with hearing impairment. I believe that is more appropriate for us to use as a House. Mr. Speaker, just as the Speaker stated in his statement, he limited his statement to persons with disability, how they can access healthcare facilities, most especially persons with hearing impairment. Mr. Speaker, I totally agree that it is important that as a country we pay more attention to such people, because indeed it's a great challenge for even you as a person, where you go to a place and you want to access something and you are being denied, not because of anything, but because you have a disability, which most of times is not their fault. It is very sad for anybody with hearing impairment to visit a health facility to share his or her problem, and then there is nobody to interact with. And so, as it was stated by earlier speakers, it is important that as a country we invest in people who interpret sign languages. It is important that at least at every health facility there is one sign language interpreter there who can assist patients in this category. It is very important we start looking at that as a country. Indeed, I know most people who are into the health sector, some of them actually have the opportunity to learn the sign language. But the question we should ask ourselves is, do they learn it just to pass the exams, or they learn it because they want to help the entire society? I believe it is important that healthcare workers are urged to take the sign language seriously, so that they can equally assist patients who are in this category. Mr. Speaker, when it comes to even we members of Parliament, we have a greater constituency, and a constituency involves basically everyone within that enclave. It is important for us to know that sometimes we ourselves, when we go to places where they speak different language or they have different cultural setting, we try to adopt the situation. So some of us are even forced to learn certain slogans, certain languages, especially if you find yourself in a Muslim community. You'll be forced to learn certain languages, or you go to certain churches and you ask what is their slogan, so that your communication could flow easily with the people. And so I will urge the House, in as much as we are engaged, we are urging all people in the healthcare sector to take sign language seriously. I'm also urging this House that at least let us make an effort and learn the basics, so that when we go to our constituency and we want to interact with them, we can easily do that, for them to also feel that they are part of us and we are also pushing their agenda. Mr. Speaker, on this note, I will say a very big thank you to the maker of the statement, And once again, thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, Honorable Member for Kwabri East. We move to the second statement from Honorable Member for Kote Kole, Honorable Dr. Senator Ajima Lawrence, on evolution and challenges of women in peace and security. Evolution.
Thank you very much, Right Honourable Speaker.
Honorable Leader, I have called her, so please let's listen to her. Yes, Honorable Member for Krotikoli, you may read your statement.
Thank you very much, Right Honourable Speaker, for the opportunity to make a statement on the challenges of women within the context of peace and security. Historically, the issue of gender, specifically women in governance, was not considered seriously enough until the world was forced to acknowledge the inequitable distribution of suffering when it comes to gender and conflict, and in more recent times. And yet even then, the appropriate wording still eludes most treaties, conventions, and resolutions with regards to the naming of gender-based sexual crimes and the consequences of committing those crimes. The COVID-19 pandemic once again highlighted the fact that women are disproportionately affected in times of crisis, as it brought to the fore many of the old cracks that had not been addressed. The United Nations organizations comprise of countries, all of whom have a heterogeneous population in terms of male and female. However, the issues concerning women's participation in governance, peacekeeping, peace building, and post-war reconstruction and development did not become topical until quite recently. It has been 22 years since the United Nations Security Council Resolution 1325/2000 was passed, yet some very real challenges remain. The Women in Peace and Security agenda was initially conceived by women in the form of pressure groups that demanded to have their voices heard on behalf of womankind at the Women's Congress in 1915 during World War I. This was the Women's International League of Peace and Freedom. When the UN was formed, the Women's Pressure Group insisted on the formation of what became the Commission for the Status of Women, which is a stem of the General Assembly of the UN and the Economic and Social Council, to be precise. This was mainly about European women, as other countries were still colonies at the time. The UN declared 1975 as the Year of the Woman, and 10 years following were declared the Decade of Women. It is noteworthy that by the 1970s, most countries had declared independence from their colonial masters, and so this so-called Decade of Women was more of a global concept. In 1979, the Convention for the Elimination of All Forms of Discrimination Against Women, CEDAW, was born and presented at the conference in Copenhagen in 1980. CEDAW is legally binding, and as progressive as it is, it made no mention of gender-based violence. Most states have signed and ratified this treaty except for the USA, which has signed but not ratified. Iran, Somalia, Sudan, and Tonga are non-signatory states to the CEDAW treaty. The year 1985 saw the largest of its kind in international women's conferences held in Nairobi, and its main themes were equality, development, and peace. Peace being not simply the absence of war, but also the freedom from violence against women. Good governance is judged by certain criteria, and according to the African Development Bank, good governance should have the following features: accountability, transparency, combating corruption, participation, legal and judicial reforms. The Vienna World Conference on Human Rights in 1993 was forced to address women's issue as a human rights issue because of the violence and sexual abuse against women that occurred in Yugoslavia at the time. Sadly, not much has changed as sexual violence against women and boys is used as a weapon of warfare. The Fourth International Women's Conference held in Beijing in 1995 made human rights and women's participation in decision-making key at all levels. One of the recommendations was for the countries to have gender desks in the ministries, departments, and agencies, including security services. It, however, cautioned against the specific establishment of women's ministries, as these would take gender issues to the periphery as the ministry would be saddled with all matters gender-related. The conference also discussed the eradication of poverty, women in armed conflict, and violence against women, all of which have become topical again as we scan the horizon globally. In the aftermath of the Beijing conference came the 1998 Windhoek Peace Conference, in which Namibia collaborated with Bangladesh to champion the Women, Peace and Security agenda, culminating in the adoption of UN Security Council Resolution 1325. This resolution recognized the disproportionate impact of conflict on women and focuses on gender balance, gender mainstreaming, accountability. Gender balance advocates the increase in female participation and representation. Gender mainstreaming is about the consideration of special needs of women in conflict, post-conflict reconstruction and development, and electoral procedures, policing, and access to justice. Following UN Security Council Resolution 1325 came supplementary resolutions such as 1820, 1888, 1889, 1960, 2122, and 2242, each of which builds upon the previous resolutions. As the UN Security Council resolutions progressed, emphasis is shifted to sexual violence. The UN Security Council Resolution 1889 focused on participation of women in the various bodies and sectors and emphasized the need for capacity building in women. The UN Security Council Resolution 1960/2010 now has the names of people or groups that are credibly suspected of crimes of sexual violence against women, and further states that the UN Security Council can institute sanctions against those on the list. The UN Security Council Resolution 2242/2015 recognized the changing context of peace and security, discussed conflict prevention and participation of women, as opposed to overemphasis on protection through military means. Within the resolutions are recommendations for member states to adopt national action plans to address gaps in 1325 and ensure that practical steps are taken to ensure the Resolution 1325 is implemented. Even though it has been addressed as security issues specifically by the UN, there are political, developmental, social, educational, and other aspects of women's roles that are perhaps being forced into the security sector for obvious reasons. The chronological account of the inception of the WPS agenda is an indicator of the fact that the issue of gender balance and mainstreaming are still not fully implemented by countries across the globe. 2 decades after UN Security Council 1325, a report by the Women's International League for Peace and Freedom found that the 3 primary challenges to progress on women, peace, and security are 1. Militarism and militarization, 2. The patriarchal and political underpinnings of the agenda, and 3. The lack of accountability for implementation. The challenges to the WPS agenda include lack of awareness, lack of commitment among main actors, and the lack of or inadequate resources or absent gender desks. And as it's known, some cultures do not regard women as equal to men in society, and sadly, others do not view sexual violence against women as a crime. And women generally are seen to have different leadership styles, which should be explored as part of resolving some of these challenges globally. There are not enough women in various leadership positions to drive the gender balance and mainstreaming aspects of the WPS agenda. The basic structure of education in most countries does not have gender sensitization and mainstreaming as part of its formal curriculum, and there is still a considerable amount of resistance in most sectors to increase the proportion of women to at least 30% recommended by the UN Security Council. Furthermore, there tends to be a narrowed focus on states in conflict or emerging from conflict without enough focus on the nations that are at peace or in relative stability. This usually means that the opportunities to create a paradigm shift in a peaceful situation are often lost as preference is given to conflict situations. Good governance includes participation in economic activities and politics, of which frequent, fair, and free elections are an important component. Unfortunately, within the political arena, the vicious verbal and sometimes physical attacks on women who dare to run for political office serves as a disincentive to other women who might be well qualified but might not be able to withstand the levels of gender-based abuse that women face in politics. There must be structures in place for the enforcement of law and order and for ensuring justice for victims of crime in order to function optimally within a gender-sensitive lens and to provide further equity and equal opportunities to women. In the area of peace building and post-conflict reconstruction and development, there are not enough women at the negotiating table, whether because of cultural and sometimes religious barriers that are placed in their way, or the fact that there are just not enough women with the capacity to fill those slots. The studies have shown that having women at the negotiation table improves outcomes and ensures that there is more sustainable peace. The CEDAW and the Security Council Resolution 1325 and many others, including international humanitarian law and international human rights law, find themselves in a gray area in more recent times as they were crafted with conventional warfare in mind. And however, now most conflicts today have transboundary components, making them sometimes intrastate with an international dimension, resulting in complexities with regards to the application of international criminal law. In conclusion, Mr. Speaker, the Women, Peace and Security agenda is difficult to water down into a homogeneous concept simply because, based on culture, social and economic spectrum in the various states, they constitute some sort of a global arena. And these concepts are built around the concepts of leadership and governance from the point of view of men, with very little reference to the opinions or contributions of women. The social constructs existing in the arena of international relations and governance have been centered on the way men think and behave as a generalization. In attempting to improve the representation and participation of women in politics, economics, and peace building, the core of these concepts must be examined and adjusted to make room for the feminine component, as it obviously is lacked in the current situation as we see it, in order to have women breaking the glass ceiling, I beg your pardon. It would appear in some ways that the over-dominance of the male factor in the spheres of governance globally has only exposed a greater defect in our social construct, which we cannot continue to ignore. Nevertheless, the pursuit of empowerment of self, as well as economic and powerful and political empowerment, must be in synergy with gender mainstreaming, which is progressive and multidimensional, and gender balance, all of which can be appropriately addressed through effective, achievable, and culturally aware national action plans and national development policies. This demands a horizontal and vertical approach to behavior modification, education in the various states, and must translate and be applicable at the smallest units of society, the family, and at the basic level of formal education in order to have a real impact. I thank you for the opportunity.
Yes, before I will invite contributors, let me make this comment. Leadership, please. I think we need to restructure the way questions are admitted into the House. Statements are brought to the House. Some of the statements are too lengthy, and they are like theses. So I think leadership, we have to look at it again. Because per article, our order 72, we shouldn't spend more than 1 hour on statements. But at times we use 10, 15 minutes to read the statement, then we also ask contributors, and it will take a lot of our precious times. It's important we admit them, but please, let's look at how we structure for our own good. I think I'm bringing it to your attention. Yes.
I think you're right, and I'm surprised. I thought my colleague, the Honorable Muntaka, would have shown a good example, because I recall not too long ago he had also nudged and raised the matter which had been dealt with. So probably he would have shown a good example by equipping his member to fall in line and to recognize that fact. I'm surprised this came up, but whatever it is, Speaker, we have taken a cue and proceeding or going forward, we will be guided accordingly and make sure we don't repeat this.
Honorable, it should be made clear. It's not only in respect of Honorable Senator's statement. It's a general statement that I'm making. Yes.
So thank you very much for that bill, because I wanted to draw his attention that it's not a one-sided thing. Now, Speaker, you recall that I have raised this, and I think that probably it's time for us to implement it. Yes, if you read the standard orders, nowhere is he giving specific time per statement. He said that there will be 1 hour allocated for statement, meaning that you can have 10 statements, 15 within. Now, Speaker, we can look at best practices elsewhere. Speaker, I know in Congress, you cannot take the floor of Congress to make a statement that will last maximum 5 minutes. In fact, the average time is 3 minutes. If your statement is lengthy, you submit it and then the details will be captured. So it is for you to raise the salient point. And then whoever is contributing will not equally be given more than 3 minutes to also contribute. But unfortunately, we have left the thing ajar over the period. And unfortunately, Mr. Speaker, I agree with you. And partly, we the leaders are to be blamed, because speakers will insist that leaders must recommend the statement. But sometimes your colleague is standing on you, and you think that you are passing the buck to the speaker by just recommending, even though you notice that it's lengthy. And speakers, upon seeing the recommendation from leaders, find it difficult to comment about the text. But Speaker, I hope we take note and ensure that statements that we recommend to your office are not just brief, but straight to the point, so that it will help in the management of the time. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Yes, let me now invite contribution. Yes, Honorable Member for Busa.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to start by commending the maker of the statement, Dr. Zenato Ajiman Rollins.
Dr. Zaneto, not Zenato.
Dr.
Zaneto.
Zaneto.
Yes.
Dr. Zaneto.
Exactly.
Thank you for the correction. Mr. Speaker, the title of the statement is very apt, and she elected to write on the evolution and challenges of women in peace and security. It is a truism, Mr. Speaker, that women bear the brunt when conflicts erupt the world over. And so, for me, this statement is very apt. It is made at a time when the Ukrainian-Russian conflict is raging on. And, Mr. Speaker, I have no doubt in my mind that after the end of the conflict, we are going to chronicle quite a number of abuses particularly targeted at women and girls. And that is why the maker of the statement was very quick to allude to UN resolution, UNSCR, United Nations Security Council Resolution 1325. This is a very important UN Security Council resolution which impacts positively on women and girls in general, particularly when conflicts erupt and even when we enter the next stage of conflict, which is conflict resolution and reconstruction. Mr. Speaker, UN Security Council Resolution 1325 is anchored on 4 major pillars, and the maker of the statement has addressed the pillars that anchor the resolution, and I'd want to refresh the memories of the House by making specific reference to the first pillar, which is on participation. And what does this pillar seek to achieve, Mr. Speaker? When conflict erupts and we are seeking to reconstruct after conflict, or to resort to the adoption of peace measures to curb conflict, Mr. Speaker, it is important that women participate in the process from the beginning to the end. In times past, women were completely excluded, but if we consider the fact that they are the ones who suffer most when conflicts break out, then we would understand why it is important to involve them in peace negotiations, peace building efforts, and even reconstruction. Mr. Speaker, UN peace support operations now makes it mandatory for countries that decide to contribute troops to the peacekeeping effort sponsored by the United Nations to ensure that amongst their troops are women. Because when you deploy women in conflict zones, Mr. Speaker, they are able to perform special duties and tasks that men ordinarily would not be able to perform. For instance, Mr. Speaker, when you are required to search armed combatants in a conflict situation, should we allow male soldiers to search female soldiers? But that is what has been happening most of the time. When you do that, Mr. Speaker, you violate the rights of women. You can imagine the male soldier asked to search females because they are suspected to be part of an armed insurrection. You end up, you touch certain parts of the female that ordinarily men should not touch. But these things happen. And so when you have a situation where women are made to participate in peacekeeping efforts, and there is the need for fellow women to be searched, for instance, they are able to search their fellow women without violating them. Their right to privacy. Yes, Mr. Speaker is laughing, but this is very true, Mr. Speaker. They want me to demonstrate, but I will not do that. It's very important.
Don't be drawn into that temptation.
But most important of all, Mr. Speaker, there is evidence. It has been proven that when you involve women in peace negotiations, at the end of the day, you are able to fashion out strategies for conflict resolution which are more acceptable to warring factions than when you limit the exercise to only men. Mr. Speaker, why is it so? Women have natural gifts. They understand men better than we understand ourselves. And so when you are seeking to resolve conflict, even in our local homes, Mr. Speaker, when men are unable to resolve very nagging issues, very complex issues, oftentimes what the men do is that they decide to go into their inner rooms. Even the chiefs do that. And who are the people who are found in the inner rooms, Mr. Speaker? The old woman sitting there is the one who would normally issue all the guidelines, give us guidance. And when they return to the quarters where, Mr. Speaker, men are gathered to resolve conflict, they are able to resolve the conflict better. These things happen even in our chief palaces across the country.
Honorable, hold on. Yes.
Mr. Speaker, may I refer you to Standing Order 72. And urge the member for Busa North, Sandema MP, to comment briefly on the subject matter under discussion. He wants to even speak more than the member from Protocol. It's very unfair. Is it the fact that he's the ranking member for Defense and Interior and she's also a member? So I don't know what he wants to belabor. So, Council, please be brief. You want to cry more than the brief?
Yes, ranking member.
Mr. Speaker, Member Patrick Palmer is my brother, so he's completely out of order.
Honorable member is quoting Standing Order 72, which is actually asking you to be brief. Just comment briefly. So just take you.
Very well, very well, very well. Very well. Mr. Speaker, in fact, I'm speaking for the women in particular because my mother is a woman. I have a lot of sisters.
You are to comment.
Well, Mr. Speaker, let me touch briefly on the other pillars. The resolution 1325 is anchored on. I've dealt with one. The second is the protection bit. That is the second pillar that UN Resolution 1325 is anchored on. And Mr. Speaker, what this pillar enjoins us to do is that when there is conflict, when there is armed conflict, we must all strive to protect women and girls from sexual exploitation. And this is very common. Whenever there is conflict,
Chibok girls.
Rape. He is making reference to the abduction of the Chibok school girls, Mr. Speaker. Most of them, when eventually they were rescued, they came back heavily pregnant. Some actually gave birth to children. And the children were products of rape. Victims, those girls became victims of sexual violence. So this pillar enjoins all of us to ensure that women are fully protected when there is armed conflict. Then we have the third...
Honorable rank member, please wind up.
Yes, Mr. Speaker, I'm concluding. The third pillar talks about prevention. And if we have to prevent, it means that those who perpetrate violence against women in armed conflict, we must ensure that they are prosecuted to serve as a deterrent. The fact that you are in a situation of war doesn't mean you can take the law into your hands and do anything. After the war, Mr. Speaker, steps must be taken to prosecute perpetrators of violence. The last pillar, and in conclusion, is the recovery effort. And Mr. Speaker, oftentimes recovery here would mean that women who flee violent conflict and become refugees would have to be well treated under the UN Refugee Convention. So our refugee camps, and this country has a number of refugee camps. I had the opportunity to talk quite a number of them. The recovery effort in those refugee camps were not up to standard because special room must be created for women. For instance, Mr. Speaker, special bathrooms, places of convenience must be designated for the women. But in most refugee camps, you find that men and women share the same facilities. That is not a healthy development at all. And so, Mr. Speaker, in conclusion, I'd like to commend the maker of the statement for bringing these issues to the fore. Thanks for the opportunity, Mr. Speaker.
Yes, let him come to you, Wild West.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Let me thank the maker of the statement. And I think that I'll be careful in mentioning the name. I hope that my senior colleague, Honorable Kodo, will hear me right. Honorable Dr. Zanato Ajman Rollins. It is a fantastic statement that is timely made. Mr. Speaker, I am saying the statement is timely because we sit in this country today and we are seeing what is happening in Bawku. So when we are talking about the power of the woman in finding resolution to conflicts, when we are talking about UN Security Council Resolution 1325, which was adopted in the year 2000 to ensure that discrimination against women in the area of finding solution to conflict is done away with. It is an important thing for us to note that the UN itself has 3 core values, and the last one has been modified since after the introduction of the UN Council Resolution 1325. Integrity, respect for diversity, and professionalism. Today we talk about respect for diversity and gender. We are talking about gender mainstreaming into every aspect of human life. Mr. Speaker, the disproportionate and unique impact of conflict on women is so important for us to note that you cannot go ahead to find solutions to such conflict without the involvement of women. Mr. Speaker, I may share a very short story. In the year 2000, I participated in finding a lasting solution to the Darfur conflict. And peacekeepers flew down from New York to Darfur, and we visited a rebel base. Mr. Speaker, after receiving briefing from a rebel leader for 30 good minutes, all the men in the team went silent. It was a woman who rose to her feet and said, "Yes, Commander, we understand the frustration, we understand why we are fighting, and we understand that you structured this conflict to last for about 50 years. But the truth remains that there is no single conflict in the world that has ever been resolved with a bullet. We must talk." And that was when all the men in the team began to realize that we have to jaw. It was the power of the woman. Sometimes the men are so emotional. Mr. Speaker, when you listen to the maker of the statement, she talks about sexual exploitation and abuse. Mr. Speaker, sexual exploitation and abuse is not only prevalent in conflict zones, it is also very prevalent even in normal times. Sexual exploitation has to do with what? Differential power in the packet. Many times, even in Ghana, the haves try to exploit the have-nots. And sometimes you think that the lady you are after is falling in love with you because you are truly a man, but it's just because you have a heavy packet. And that amounts to exploitation. Mr. Speaker, the issue of Bawku that I raised, it's an important aspect because the National Peace Council must have attention drawn to UN Security Council Resolution 25. We cannot continue to find a lasting solution to the Bawku conflict without recourse to the power of the woman in ensuring that that disproportionate and unique impact that it has on the people of Bawku, women, or on the people of Bawku, or the women of Bawku, will have to be factored into the solution. Mr. Speaker, we have women of substance, be they Mampusis, Kusasis, or Ghanaians in general. And this statement will be a guide for us to shine as an example that Ghana is capable of handling our own affairs. We don't need any international intervention. We have the capacity to find a lasting solution to the Bawku debacle. It's been long overdue, and the time to hold it by the horn is now. In brief, Mr. Speaker, gender mainstreaming is a very important element if we want to talk about respecting the UN Security Council Resolution 1325. If you look at many security agencies in this country now, many of them are enhancing their recruitment processes to ensure that a lot of women are getting into the system. And I can tell you as a matter of fact that the Ghana Police Service has gone beyond 25% of women in uniform. And they are gradually getting to the 30% minimum required by the United Nations. And I think that that is a plus, and we all have to applaud them for that. In conclusion, Mr. Speaker, women suffer more than any other person. Children suffer more than any other person. But the men, we are always the ones, in many occasions, leading the battle. But when it comes to creating a solution, we think that the women are not necessary. It is on this note that I thank the Speaker once again for bringing this matter up to the front burner. And all of us ought to take a look at it and respect UN Security Council Resolution 1325. It is almost 22 years that it was passed, and I think that the impact on international peace and security cannot be overemphasized. On this note, Mr. Speaker, I thank you very much for the opportunity.
Well, thank you very much. Leadership, do you bring statement time to a close, or should we can
Speaker, there is an outstanding. There's the last one. There's the last one to be delivered by the Honorable Ablapa, and we'll be done with statement.
Is it the one by Honorable Kujoto? Very well. Honorable members, we have the third statement and the statement is by Ranking Member on Parliamentary Affairs on the urgent need for Ghanaian universities to create a special academic transfer dispensation for Ghanaian students evacuated from Ukraine. Honorable Member for Northton, you have the floor now.
Right, Honourable Speaker, I am immensely grateful to you for the opportunity to make this statement on the urgent need for Ghanaian universities to create a special academic transfer dispensation for our young Ghanaian compatriots, the admirably courageous students who have been evacuated from Ukraine. Mr. Speaker, as many honourable members may be aware, I have only recently returned from Romania, the friendly nation on the southern border of Ukraine, where I went to visit students who had managed to escape from the Russian invasion of Ukraine, which began on the 24th of February 2022. When I arrived in Bucharest, Mr. Speaker, in the morning of Wednesday, 2nd March 2022, that beautiful city was hosting some 200 Ghanaian students, the largest number when compared to students who had sought refuge in other Ukrainian neighboring countries such as Hungary, Poland, Moldova, Slovakia, and the Czech Republic. Mr. Speaker, we do know that the conflict in Ukraine appears far from over. The United Nations Human Rights Office reported on Tuesday last week that it had verified 1,335 civilian casualties in Ukraine, including 474 killed and 861 injured since the invasion. The UN body said the worst affected towns were Volnovaka, Mariupol, and Izium. The United Nations Refugee Agency, UNHCR, also said that more than 2.3 million people have fled Ukraine since the invasion, making this the fastest moving refugee crisis in Europe since the end of the Second World War. The UNHCR expects at least 4 million refugees from Ukraine in the short term. Mr. Speaker, all indications are that there have been further escalations, with Ukraine coming under constant attacks that seems to have multiple targets, including civilian areas. So, Mr. Speaker, while we in this August chamber demand an immediate ceasefire and a diplomatic solution to the crisis to avert a third world war, it should be obvious to us from the heart-wrenching images of wide-scale destruction, with entire cities reduced to rubble, that when the dust settles, the road to recovery will indeed be long and arduous. Mr. Speaker, this is the reason why there is an urgent need to consider alternative options for our student escapees. According to the National Union of Ghana Students, NUC's chapter in Ukraine, they had an active registered membership of 959 students. It is estimated by consular officials that there may be as many as 1,500 Ghanaians who were domiciled in Ukraine. So, Mr. Speaker, during my interaction with our students in Romania, at a lunch session I organized, the most pressing issue that agitated their minds was how they were going to complete their academic journey and achieve their dreams of becoming medical doctors. As we know, more than 90% of these students traveled to Ukraine to pursue medicine. Most of them had much advanced on the ladder, with a good number of them in 5th year and 6th year. That's the final year. Indeed, Mr. Speaker, final year students are estimated to be about 200, and instructively, they had only 3 months to graduate. So, Mr. Speaker, we are not oblivious of how critical the situation of acute shortage of medical doctors in our dear country is. According to the Ghana Health Service, in 2021, the doctor-to-patient ratio in Ghana stood at an abysmal 1:6,355. This is terribly far from the WHO recommended doctor-to-patient ratio of 1:1,000. As MPs, we all know how exceptionally precarious the situation is in some of our regions. For example, the Upper East region has only 53 doctors in total, and they are serving 1.3 million people in the region. That gives us a ratio of 1:24,097. This statistics was made available by the Regional Health Director, Dr. Emmanuel Kofi Jochi. In our outstanding minority leaders, Tamale, the shortage has even worsened from 1:8,859 in 2020 to 1:10,000, that is one doctor to 10,901 patients in 2021. Our situation is so dire that it is often claimed that there are more Ghanaian medical doctors in New York than in the whole of Ghana. I concern Dr. Michael Obeng, a US-based plastic surgeon, and Her Excellency Arikana Chihombori Kwao, ex-AU ambassador to the United States, both re-echoed in July last year. Mr. Speaker, according to the World Bank 2017 report on the West African challenge with medical doctors, Cape Verde was ranked number 1, followed by Guinea-Bissau. Ghana is ranked number 4. Mr. Speaker, I believe that it is this uncertain academic future for our students that is leading to many of them refusing to return to Ghana, despite the dangers they face out there. Our Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Regional Integration, in a March 8, 2022 statement, reported that only 181 Ghanaian students have so far been evacuated, with more than 70% refusing to come back home, even after government has purchased their tickets. I sincerely believe, Mr. Speaker, that if Ghanaian public and private medical schools came up with a special dispensation to allow for seamless academic transfers, where students from Ukraine can be admitted at the levels they were before disaster struck, our students will be more motivated to return to Ghana. Mr. Speaker, these students have invested so much. Their parents and guardians have had to pay a great amount of thousands of US dollars to fund their education thus far, and we cannot let all that go waste. When, to be honest, Mr. Speaker, this country needs them more than they need us. It is significant to note that according to NUCS Ukraine, out of the over 1,000 students, only 31 are on government scholarship, which shows that so many of them were funding their fees by themselves. Mr. Speaker, it is important to acknowledge the offers that have generously been made from friendly countries such as Bulgaria, Hungary, Canada, and the Caribbean nation of Grenada. The question is, if other nations can make such generous offers on humanitarian grounds, why can't charity begin at home, with Ghanaian universities also making an offer to take care of our own? Are other countries not embarrassing us when we seem to be looking the other way when our youth are in such distress? Mr. Speaker, we should bear in mind that a lot of these offers are not free offers, and when one considers the cost of flight tickets, living expenses and accommodation, our fellow younger citizens might be far better off completing their courses here in Ghana. In any case, Mr. Speaker, as the saying goes, there is no place like home. Let us not forget that these are traumatized students who have been to hell and back. The least we can do to assist their full rehabilitation is to ensure we give them a Ghanaian opportunity to fulfill their dreams. This, with all due respect, Mr. Speaker, cannot be too much to ask. Mr. Speaker, do permit me at this juncture to make other brief observations from my visit to Romania. Engaging with our students, it was clear that they had been through a traumatic experience laced with racism and discrimination of the highest order at the Ukrainian border. I joined the UN and the AU in condemning what Africans were put through. That acknowledged the quintessential Ghanaian spirit of survival and resilience in the face of adversity served our students well. NUCS Ukraine, led by President Mr. Philip Bobiansa, have been phenomenal with their leadership. They represent the greatness and smartness of the Ghanaian youth. Their proactive evacuation strategy out of Ukraine through secured bus routes into neighboring countries deserves high praise. I must place on record, Mr. Speaker, the heroic exploits of Mame Akosia Ejacobia Ado, the final year medical student and former NUC's Ukraine General Secretary, who continues to be celebrated by her colleagues for her bravery in assisting her weary and famished colleagues across the Ukrainian-Romanian border on multiple occasions. A modern-day Yar Santua, one may argue. Mr. Speaker, the Pentecost Church, Pensa Europe, also deserves great commendation, and we must place on record that they have ignited fresh hope as to what it actually means to be Christ-like. The government of Ghana, Mr. Speaker, in all objectivity, must also be commended for the decision to evacuate our fellow citizens back home and for the noble efforts they have made so far. Mr. Speaker, as I have indicated elsewhere, and time without number, our country owes Romania a debt of gratitude. Their rare hospitality, genuine kindness, and infectious love, particularly by their devoted volunteers for our students, must be eternally highlighted. I did observe with admiration how they were never late with their lunch packs to the Hello Hotel in Bucharest. Their tents at the border came in as a timely gesture of succor for our fellow Ghanaians. They also helped in driving some of our students for some 10 hours from the border towns to the capital. May God richly bless them for their show of humanity. Ghana is truly grateful, and let the records reflect that not all Caucasians exhibited racism in these difficult times. Mr. Speaker, it is clear to me that it is time to formulate a modern emergency response policy for Ghana's foreign ministry and its diplomatic missions abroad. Such a policy will largely address the gaps identified, which includes poor early response mechanisms, adequate deployment of personnel. For instance, putting only one consular officer in charge of the entire Romanian evacuation, the Speaker, was atrocious. Even though I must salute Consular Officer Mr. Ahmed Abubakar Tijani for doing his best in the circumstances. Also lacking, Mr. Speaker, was the fiscal presence at the borders to make prior arrangements and to confront the racial ordeal during the crossings. Mr. Speaker, the delay in establishing a consular fund for diplomatic missions aimed at serving as an emergency source of funds for supporting Ghanaians in distress, which we have consistently advocated in this parliament for the last 4 years, has once again exposed us. But for the resources belonging to NUC's Ukraine and the commendable Pensa support, initial evacuation into neighboring countries will have been almost impossible. The Finance Ministry must, as a matter of urgency, establish and populate the consular fund, which this House has consistently urged that it should be established, particularly following an Auditor General's recommendation. Mr. Speaker, with respect, when we create a holding facility to temporarily house our nationals fleeing conflict or any other disaster, as we have done in European capital cities, like what we have at the Hello Hotel in Romania, it will be extremely useful to engage psychologists and medical professionals to attend to our compatriots immediately upon arrival. It is regrettable that we didn't make this provision. There are many of these professionals, particularly Ghanaian professionals abroad, willing and able to assist for free if only they are identified, engaged, and mobilized. We must not underestimate the long-term effects of trauma, unending flashbacks, and extreme stress from the scourge of war on our young students. That notwithstanding, Mr. Speaker, I do hope that we shall make amends with psychological support for those arriving in Ghana. Mr. Speaker, as I conclude, do kindly permit me to reiterate my humble call for our reputable Ghanaian universities to urgently put together a special package to admit our courageous students who deserve our strategic kindness. I respectfully urge the Ministers of Education and Foreign Affairs to lead efforts in this regard. Mr. Speaker, as evacuations continue, may I wish all students journey mercies. Our thoughts and prayers continue to be with them. May the Russia-Ukraine war be brought to an end. May peace prevail in our world, and may we be ushered into an era without the many conflicts currently afflicting humankind. I am eternally grateful, Mr. Speaker.
we are pressed with time, so I will give one and probably come to leadership. So one here, then I'll give leadership the opportunity. Let him come to Honorable Teglabi.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Speaker. And thank you, Mr. Speaker, for the opportunity to, yes, indeed, to comment on a statement made by Honorable Okujeto. Mr. Speaker, the situation as it is in Ukraine is very unfortunate, and we pray that it was. But Mr. Speaker, there's a lesson that as a country we need to learn and to take advantage of. Mr. Speaker, I am happy to hear that the number of students in Ukraine, in Ukraine, are all fee-paying students. And a lot of them are there because one way or the other they are unable to get opportunity in our local universities. Mr. Speaker, what it means is that if our training institutions decide in a short term we want them to arrange for the continuation and completion of their courses, but in the long term we need to really re-examine how we train, especially medical officers in this country. Mr. Speaker, I had the opportunity to be a member of a team that went round when the KNUST, was thinking about how to restructure, reorganize, training of health and allied professionals in KNUST. Some of the universities that we visited, including some universities in the Eastern world, their facilities, Mr. Speaker, are not too different from what we have over here. The only thing that is different is time management and how the courses are arranged. I believe that this is the time to start thinking in the long term. We should have a long-term program where students, and we have instances where students, who had, failed to get admission into our medical schools, go to these places and they perform. They perform very well. We have a situation where, about 90% of these students who are fee paying, at the end of every year, would have to chase, our hard-earned dollars. Yes. Mr. Speaker, what it means is that they are also part of the problem that we have now. At the beginning of the year, if you have about 2,000 students, and each student pays on an average about $5,000, if you multiply, and this dollar is procured on the open market. So, Mr. Speaker, I believe that if we position ourselves well as training institutions in this country, we can also cash in and make some money for the institutions. So, I'd like to, impress on the Minister for Education. The Minister of Education, government, policymakers, we need to rethink. Let's re-look at training in our higher institutions in this country. We have a lot of private universities now, training lawyers, training all manner of professionals. But when it comes to the sciences, especially medicine, Mr. Speaker, the impression is created that it is impossible, but it can be done. It can be done, Mr. Speaker. And therefore, let's take advantage of what is happening now and plan long term, so that at the end of the day, Ukraine is popular. The Eastern European countries, a lot of them are popular now because of the fact that they provide facilities for people to train. We can do that. Mr. Speaker, with this, I thank you for the opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let me come to you, Honorable Andrew Apiekubi.
Mr. Speaker, I thank you very much for the opportunity to contribute to this statement ably made by my colleague and former student leader. I appreciate his concern for the students.
very commendable. Mr. Speaker, I want to also commend the people of Romania for the show of humanitarian concern towards our students in time of need. Again, I want to show also that they have been for us and as we need them always. So that show of humanitarian concern is very commendable. Mr. Speaker, let me also say that we have to congratulate our students who showed a lot of courage in that situation and also helped themselves to get out of the conflict situation. They showed a lot of courage, which is legendary of Ghanaians, and we want to commend them hugely. I also want to show remorse for some of the atrocities that we have witnessed, and indeed show some concern, especially when civilian installations have been attacked in this conflict. Especially so when yesterday there was a reportage that a hospital was hit by the Russian forces. I am not taking sides in this matter, but I want to re-emphasize the need to take out civilian and humanitarian institutions out of this conflict. And I also want to urge both parties to come to the negotiating table and make sure that we avert further destruction of life and property. There is also the need to also respect international protocols as we are members of the international community. And therefore, I urge our leaders to come to the aid of the vulnerable citizens of Ukraine. Mr. Speaker, the students have come back. Some of them are still there. There is no justification in their continuous stay in the country when the conflict has not been abated. It is important for them to come back home. They say safety first is the rule of the game. So that when they are here, we will look after their interest. Mr. Speaker, with that, I want to also agree with my brother that our local universities must also have a place for them. We may have to urge the various university councils to design new schemes of admission for such students. Some of them are already in their final stages of study, and we cannot let this one go without completion. Indeed, if they stay in the house for too long, they will be staying by the time that the universities invite them to come back. So it is incumbent on ourselves to convince our universities in Ghana to give them a window for them to enter so that they can complete their various courses. I also want to commend the maker of the statement for showing appreciation to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, who were very proactive in coming to the aid of the students. And indeed, the package as extended to the students showed that the minister was on top of the issues, and the personnel on the ground, particularly the protocol officers at the various borders, they did tremendously well, and I want to commend them. But first and foremost, commend the Speaker, the maker of the statement, for recognizing the contribution of the ministry and, for that matter, the government of Ghana. The reference to the citizen-doctor ratio in Ghana is very alarming. And indeed, when the maker of the Speaker quotes the UN standard as 1 to 800 or so, I even wasn't too comfortable. Because in other parts of the world, we will have something like 1 to 500, 1 to 200, 1 to 300 to one citizen to a ratio. But if we are comfortable in 1 to 1,200 ratio, I'm not sure that is the best practice. So we should be concerned generally that our health delivery system is not the best, and therefore work towards it. Mr. Mr. Speaker, I want to end by saying that this House also have a responsibility to come to the aid of these students, and therefore we can, as a collective unit, influence the various university councils for this facility to our students. Sometimes we come here and talk about the need to intervene, and we fall short of approaches to getting the end. On this occasion, I will urge my brother, who was also a student leader, for us to join forces to proceed to the university campuses, make sure that we have audience with the university councils and secure the entry of our students. And then we can come back to report that we have accomplished an assignment. Advocacy alone sometimes may not be the solution to the problem. Mr. Speaker, I thank you very much for the opportunity.
Yes, leadership. You may decide to forgo anyway.
Sorry, Speaker.
You may decide to forgo.
Speaker,
if you don't want to contribute, fine.
Speaker, I want to speak.
Okay, let's hear.
I will be brief. Speaker, I think it's important we commend our colleague, the Honorable Ablakwa, for this important statement. And as I read news of his visitation to all these areas, I thought that Parliament had done well, the ranking member had done well. But most importantly, we have to commend the ministry. It's a fact that Ghana is among few countries that were able to repatriate nationals in the early days of the conflicts and the exchanges. So it's important, and I commend the Minister of Foreign Affairs highly for this intervention. Across the world, if you take, for instance, the Gulf Medical University, such intervention has been taken, and third world students have been accepted to continue their programs. I mean, students coming from Ukraine, all over the world have been accepted. I'm told Hungary has done same, as well as Poland. The President's recent visit to Dubai, he made a passionate call, and it got a good attention from the authorities of the United Arab Emirates, who have opened their doors for students from third world countries, particularly Ghana, to be considered for continuation of their studies, especially medical students. And so it's something that we have to give attention to. I think the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, in conjunction with the Ministry of Education, I am aware of some discussion that is ongoing with the university leadership. They may have to step up this discussion and get it concretized. Then we can be sure of the roadmap and what we have to do. That should be the approach. Only to conclude that we know in war situations there have been a way women and children are handled. In this instance where Russia had invaded Ukraine, I don't think there was a defined path how students should be handled. And it generated a lot of furore and conflict. So going forward, the UN may have to take a decision on concerns such as this, where it will be considered as a high priority set of people when these things happen. Having said that, I think that the ranking member and the committee as a whole should collaborate more with the ministry, because already most Ghanaian nationals have been repatriated. So a bit more of collaboration at the committee level, and the ministry will help and go a long way for us to conclude on these matters. Finally, on the consular fund, I recall when I was the Foreign Affairs Committee chair, together with my colleague, flowing from the SG, the Societe Generale 50 million facility, which was devoted to give a facelift to our missions across the world. And this government continued from where the previous government left off. The consular fund, the call for the consular fund, is not only limited to a crisis situation. It's something that is important, is legitimate across the world. Most missions across the world have these funds. And so the Minister of Finance will have to give a real meaning to this call and give some impetus to it so that we see the light of day and for it to be established. So that some of these things could be dealt with before defined efforts are put in place to repatriate and to deal with this situation. So I commend the maker of the statement, and I also commend the ministry for their timeous intervention in these matters. I thank you, Speaker.
Yes, Leader, let me come to you.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Usually, I will comment before him. I'm not really going to say much, except to say that, yes, the statement is timely. But whether Mr. Speaker will be minded to get the Ministries of Foreign Affairs and Education to look at, the committee, to look at this statement and see what we can do from our end here. Because once these students are stranded, are we just going to just cross our fingers and pretend that nothing is happening? I know a lot of countries you can easily move your credit and continue and order. So if we could get the two committees to look at this statement and the challenges that our students are going through, so that they could make some recommendation that will help government in its implementation. That's the recommendation I thought I should make. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you very much. I personally know that the ministry is doing something, but I think it will not be out of place if we refer this committee, this report or statement to Education and Foreign Affairs Committee to also look at it and collaborate with the ministry. So the Committee on Foreign Affairs and Education are hereby assigned to this particular statement. They should look at it and collaborate with the ministry and report back to us. Yes, Leader.
Speaker, we may now go on to public business. Today's order paper, page 4, and take item 11. 4, item 11.
Honorable members, please let's turn to item number 11, page 4 on today's order paper. Motion. Yes. Motion. So this will mark the commencement of public business. So, Chairman of Finance Committee, you may have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise to move the motion listed on today's order paper and in the process present your committee's report. It is in respect of the loan
But Committee Chairman, do you have the report around?
Yeah, Mr. Speaker, we have distributed copies, but we still have some copies, and I have advised that those copies also be brought to members.
Please, let's make sure the members.
Yeah, Mr. Speaker, it is in respect of a loan agreement between it's in respect of a loan agreement between the government of the Republic of Ghana and a KWF Frankfurt Main for an amount of 20 million euros to finance the green credit line under the Reform and Investment Partnership between the government of the Republic of Ghana and the Federal Republic of Germany. Mr. Speaker, the overall objective of the project is to achieve the national target of reducing greenhouse gas emissions by 15% by 2030 and achieving a renewable energy share of 10% of the total energy mix. The project will also contribute to the development of a sustainable green finance market as one of the preconditions for promoting an RE and EE market in Ghana. Mr. Speaker, the facility will be the final beneficiaries. The terms and conditions of the main loan are captured under paragraph 6 of your committee's report, the on-lending terms are captured under paragraph 8.1. Mr. Speaker, it's important that even though I request the Handler Department to capture the entire content, that I highlight this part. Mr. Speaker, after extensive deliberation on these terms with the officials of the Ministry of Finance, the committee took the view that the spread between the rates at which Ministry of Finance and Bank of Ghana intend to on-lend to the participating financial institutions and the rate at which the financial institutions lend to the final beneficiaries is too large. The committee therefore recommends to the House to approve this facility at a cap interest rate of 12% per annum instead of the 15% per annum being proposed by the Ministry of Finance as the rate at which the financial institutions would on-lend to the beneficiaries of the facility. Mr. Speaker, in conclusion, after a careful examination of the agreement, the committee is convinced that the facility, when approved, would harness the potentials of renewable energy and minimize the adverse effect of energy production on the environment, reduce poverty, increase access to clean energy, improve socio-economic development, and increase the percentage of renewable energy in the energy mix of the country. We therefore urge this House to approve this facility so we can benefit from the many benefits as subject to the committee's recommendation to this House that the on-lending interest rate to beneficiaries should be capped at 12% instead of the 15% that the Ministry of Finance presented. Respectfully submitted, Mr. Speaker.
Yes. Sorry, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, is undesirable, but unfortunately, a lot of members from my end were drawing our attention to Order 48. Mr. Speaker, it is only fair that we let the bell ring and try to see if in 10 minutes we'll be able to get the numbers to avoid closing earlier. He's asking me that meaning that we don't want us to work. And I'm asking him that where are his people? So, Mr. Speaker, it is only fair that we take notice and then we get the bell to be rung for 10 minutes whilst business continues. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Yes, let me hear you.
Speaker, I trying to resist the temptation of commenting on the call made by the leader. This didn't come out of the ordinary. It's as a result of an extensive discussion we had. And I am totally taken aback by this. But be it as it may, if the bell has to be rung, fine. Speaker, I will want to edge this out. Let's look at this matter in perspective. Let's look at this matter in perspective. It's about a call for renewable energy mix in our country to be improved. And we are masters of our own rules. We are masters. We are. What's it? I want to further plead. I only want to plead with my colleagues. I want to plead with our colleagues that a motion has been moved. Let's wait for it to be seconded, and then we can debate it. It's very important we deal with this matter. This is a matter that cannot be shelved. And I see Honorable Bauer, he's very passionate about the need for renewable energy mix to be improved in this country. And I'm totally surprised. Are you saying, Honorable Bauer, are you saying we should put this aside? Are you telling Ghanaians that we don't need renewable energy in our energy mix? So, Speaker, our colleagues should just accede to this call, and let's do the needful. Then we can progress.
Honorable Table, may you consider the bill to be read? The bill to be read. So, or you are withdrawing? You are.
Mr. Speaker, I am trying to help you manage the difficulty, but my colleague made a comment that needs to be corrected. When you say that extensive consultation has been done, yes, it is true we've agreed to do a number of business, but you cannot consult about the numbers. For the numbers, you have to have it. So please, let's not make it look as if we have deliberately agreed that even though we are only you and I sitting in the chamber, we are agreeing to do anything against the rules. No. The understanding is that we used to run, and we've agreed that we are going to do ABCD. But obviously, if quorum are raised, you cannot negotiate that out. Thank you.
Speaker, I apologize to my colleagues. Speaker, with respect and not to be offensive, if that statement sounds offensive, unreservedly withdrawn, and I apologize accordingly. And on that score, Speaker, I'm rising on my feet to second the motion.
Mr. Speaker, yes, he has called me. Mr. Speaker, I rise to second the motion.
I want them to raise the constitutional issue. They have a constitutional issue.
Let me sit by. Mr. Speaker, I rise to second the motion moved by the chairman of the finance committee for the facility between the Republic of Ghana, represented by the Ministry of Finance, and Credit Council Full Vida Rough for a facility of 20 million euros. 20 million euros to implement the greenhouse project. Let me finish. Mr. Speaker,
hello, honorable members, please. Honorable Kujetu, I allow you to read the statement. Now, after statement, you want us to.
Mr. Speaker, I thought you would hear me first. I haven't been heard. I'm rising on an order 41 matter. It's past 2 p.m. So order 41, whether we are extending time or adjourning, that has not been done.
Order what?
Order 41. Extension of time. It's past 2 p.m.
It's now 2 o'clock.
No, it looks like a parliamentary watch is late. It's 6 minutes past 2.
Fine, we will extend it.
Yes.
So, honorable members, I will kindly indulge you to allow me to extend sitting beyond the normal hours of 2. So now
Mr. Speaker,
Honorable member for Whole Central, please second the motion.
Mr. Speaker, I have reason to second the motion. The facility was brought before the Finance Committee, and we examined the terms of the loan, and we found that the grant element is so high, and therefore the terms are favorable. Our concern, however, Mr. Speaker, is that the participating institutions through which the disbursement will be done the participating institutions should be made to be very fair in the disbursement of the facility to the SMEs and then the private homes that will be implementing the project. Mr. Speaker, let me end quickly. By saying that the committee recommends this facility for the approval of the House for the project to be implemented. I thank you.
Honorable members, the motion has been moved and the motion has been seconded. It's now before the House. I will invite one from each side by way of debate. So let me hear your honorable member for Etiwa East and Deputy Minister for Finance. Etiwa East, let me hear you. What?
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this loan seeks to expand Ghana's access to renewable energy, among others, and with an amount of 20 million euros. And this is under the J20 Compact with Africa. Mr. Speaker, this loan has very, very good concessional terms. We have a tenor of 38 years, a grace period of 6 years, and the grant element alone is 53.26%. So, Mr. Speaker, we believe that if the House should agree to this, it will go a long way to help us expand on access to renewable energy. Mr. Speaker, the Ministry has also taken notice of the recommendation by the committee on the interest rates, that it should be capped to 12%. So the Ministry, the interest rates from the private financial institutions to the final beneficiaries. And we have taken note of that, and we will work with that. Mr. Speaker, I'd like to thank the committee and the House for their support in this regard, and I urge all of us to approve of this law. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Yes.
Speaker, not to overflog the matter, this is a very important facility. Already we have an existing template as a country when it comes to renewable energy and clean energy implementation. We passed the Renewable Energy Act. We set the Marshall Plan for renewable energy. We set our target 10% as a country, and this is coming to enhance and to facilitate these targets that we set to ourselves as a country. Speaker, what I find intriguing is that apart from the 20 million euro there is also an additional €2 million, which is to facilitate the support of technical knowledge for the implementation of this project. Again, if you scan Africa, for instance, countries like, I think, Kenya, who are doing very well when it comes to government partnership with the private sector in the implementation of renewable energy. And I see that inherent in the agreement. So this is something that is so important we have to look at. Again, the dependence of the over-dependence on our national grid by our industrial sector and particularly other institutions could be weaned off if we are able to implement this project to the latter. Therefore, institutions like schools and other tertiary institutions could be weaned off the national grid, and then the focus could be on industry, where our national grid could focus on industry and renewable energy will come in to support. Speak across the world, even the most industrialized countries like Germany, they are all shutting down their coal plants because renewable energy is becoming the order of the day. But there's a fine balance that we have to toe, which has to do with third world countries. The argument is being made that industrialized countries have polluted. They have realized or dependent on fossil fuel source of energy to industrialize. So we may have to find a subtle way of depending on renewable energy at the same time making very good use of the traditional sources of energy. So this is an important facility, and I urge the entire House to support this as such. Speaker, thank you for the space granted.
Very well. Honourable members, at the conclusion of the debate, the question is yes.
Mr. Speaker, can we stand the question down?
Come again?
We should stand the question down.
You stand the question down.
For lack of.
Very well.
I want to finally plead with our colleagues. I am not contesting issues raised. You are right, and I'm in total agreement. But I'm passionately pleading with colleagues that to the extent that we've set the tone and the matter at hand, I am pleading, I'm just pleading that we let go and get this thing passed. It's time dependent, and it's important we get this thing passed. Don't forget, colleagues, if I may just conclude on this matter, don't forget, there are very important partners who are critical variables in this agreement, and this is time dependent. The whole world and the partners are waiting on this institution called Parliament to pass this agreement. It is almost like a grant, and if it goes beyond the time limit, it may affect Ghana as a sovereign entity. I plead with you.
As leaders of the House, one of the things that helps us to help Mr. Speaker manage the House is checking the mood of the House. And you cannot just discount that. When you are in the leadership and you discount that, you create unnecessary problems for everybody. I agree with him. We had an understanding we're doing a number of business today, willing to stay beyond the 2 o'clock. One critical one was what we call the pre-bargain bill. Yes, we agreed to do a number of other finance committee reports, but you need to be mindful of the mood of the House. Let us not allow the House to degenerate. And so I want to urge my colleague that yes, whereas we are doing the best that we can to cope with the challenges that we have, we should know that we live today to see tomorrow. Let's see what we can do tomorrow when we mobilize our both sides to be able to do it. to be able to come here tomorrow. But believe me, where we are, any attempt to carry on will create problem for all of us. So I urge that we just leave the question, and he knows that we've stood down questions like that. At appropriate time, we're able to put those questions. I agree. This one is a grant that is coming to us as a country, almost free of charge. But let's see what we can do. Let's see what we can do tomorrow. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Speaker, thank you for the opportunity. Speaker, first of all, I rise for clarification on a lot of matters. Speaker, the recent... why? But don't I have the right to be recognized? Speaker, the matter that is very hazy in my mind is this. The Supreme Court recently made a distinction between a decisional quorum and a non-decisional quorum. Now, please, would you let me speak? Now, in my humble opinion, even to adopt votes and proceedings in this house, it's a matter of decision. In my humble opinion. Hold on. Yes, please.
Speaker, I think we don't need to belabor this matter. I will accede to the call by my good friend, the Honorable Muntaka, Minority Chief Whip, that, Mr. Speaker, you don't put the question. It's quite regrettable, but you don't put the question. We take it tomorrow to put all other matters at rest. So, Speaker, if you may give directive so that we leave this question and continue with it tomorrow.
So, honourable members, let me be clear. So, we have a lot of business to do. Are you saying that because we don't have the numbers, we can't move on?
Speaker, if I may conclude.
The Supreme Court is saying it.
Honorable Jafiamapo, hold on. Let me hear you.
Speaker, yes. As you directly said, all other matters will be put on hold. Apart from the laying of a paper, we will lay just one paper. Questions to be put will all be put on hold.
Yes, Honorable Jafiamapo, let me.
Yes, Speaker, thank you. Mr. Speaker, my point simply is this. Even the decision to lay a paper in this house is a decision we have to take. Oh, Bawku, stop shouting no. To the recent Supreme Court decision, even to lay a paper after prayers, any other business after prayers, is a decision this house takes. So, I am struggling to appreciate clarity in terms of procedure. That if leadership says there is an understanding, the Supreme Court has made it clear that even a 30-year-old understanding in this house is not the law. Even a 30-year-old understanding in terms of procedure, it is not the law. So everything must be done in accordance with the letter and spirit of the law. So when the Supreme Court says that there has to be a quorum for commencement, once that is achieved, any other thing must be subjected to decision making.
So, Mr. Speaker, with all due respect, even to decide how many members will debate to a motion and how long they debate, it's also a matter of a decision that this House must take. Yes. Okay. So, please respect yourself. I respect you as my chairman of the committee. Sit down and respect yourself. Why?
Honorable.
Why?
I'll come to you.
What disorderly conduct is that?
Honorable Samir, please, hold on.
So, let us bring clarity to the pronouncement of the Supreme Court going forward. There will be no arrangements that will run affront to the constitutional provisions in 102. Look, when they say there's a quorum for commencement, it has to be respected. We will no longer go by arrangements, and then tomorrow, when somebody is aggrieved, they'll go for a proper interpretation. The interpretation must always be followed. Mr. Speaker, these are my grievances. We need clarity on this matter. I thank you.
Senior, I'll come to you. Let me hear a chairman of the Constitution.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the leader on the other side, Honorable Munchaka, raised Order 48, and the bell was tolled. In accordance with the rules, we need to wait for the time to elapse, and then we count the number of people within the House to see whether we have 90 or 94. The issue about 102 and 104, Mr. Speaker, is unfortunate. What I had rather discussed with leadership is that it is a fact that on our side, we are undergoing grassroots organization of our party. We are doing our side. It is not only on our side alone that a grassroots organization would be done. We do it all the time. And in this House, Mr. Speaker, I've always observed on both sides, press on the rules in order that we could accommodate ourselves and do business in the House. And I was urging that if leadership had agreed that we have to lay a paper and then close the House, I cannot ask for more. Mr. Speaker, thank you.
I'm taking one. Let him come to Honorable Ahiafo.
Mr. Speaker, thank you very much for giving me the opportunity. Mr. Speaker, it's said that the law is about common sense, and common sense is the law. And it is trite learning that when a procedure is set down for a right to be exercised, it is that procedure alone that will have to be followed in exercising that particular right. There are plethora of cases on that. Mr. Speaker, as we speak now, there is no ambiguity about Article 102 and Article 104 of the 1992 Constitution. The Supreme Court has taken the trouble in the case of Justice Abulai versus the Attorney General to explain clearly to the understanding of an ordinary person guided by all those considerations that regulate the conduct of human affairs, that this is the issue of quorum at commencement, and our decision making, you have to be guided by Article 104. There is no ambiguity about this. The issue that should guide us is that at commencement, do we have the quorum based on the constitutional provision interpreted by the Supreme Court? At the time of decision taking, do we have the majority of members present to take that particular decision? Going forward, Mr. Speaker, these should be the guiding principles. We cannot whittle away with it. Nobody can say, Parliament, we are the masters of our own rules. If we are masters of our own rules, where was Parliament before the Supreme Court has given a clear interpretation to the issue? Mr. Speaker, we should be careful not to be in contempt of the Supreme Court. So the rules must guide all of us in conducting business in this house. The issue as to whether or not something is happening in our constituencies is neither here nor there. The law must be followed according to its spirit and letter. Mr. Speaker, thank you for giving me the opportunity.
Yes, Adam said this year.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, to a very large extent, I would want to appreciate the point made by a colleague who just spoke. Because, of course, the Supreme Court is clarified. It's articulated the powers of this House vis-a-vis that of the Constitution. So I accept entirely, well, in its entirety, maybe not in its entirety, quite a lot of what he has said. What, Mr. Speaker, I'm appealing to the House to appreciate is this. Even though the Supreme Court has clarified the issues, listen. I'm not going to seek your indulgence. Calmly listen to what I'm going to say. Mr. Speaker, we must understand, and maybe it is incumbent on the speakership to explain what the court has said, because what our colleague, Honorable the fear. Mr. Speaker, what he said is entirely in contravention. It's entirely contradictory to what the Supreme Court said. Rather, it is my colleague, my learned friend who just spoke. Unlike him, the other learned friend who spoke, he seems to, Mr. Speaker, have articulated the stance of what was said. The court did not say, and you got it completely wrong. You don't have the floor. 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 So, Mr. Speaker, it is true the court is explained it, but let's get the handle of what the court said, and we shouldn't be saying the kind of thing that he said. For example, he's saying that Mr. Speaker, commonsensical, it is commonsensical. Mr. Speaker, the law is never always in all the contexts being commonsensical or logical. I know of a situation where it was put in order that, but the law is illogical. And he said to them in the repository that when did anybody ever say that the law was logical? There are certain aspects of the law which aren't entirely common sense, but it is the law. So don't confuse the two, don't conflate the two. But it is fine. You want to stick to the quorum, 90-something of our people, that is true. But take out the question that issue has to be voted on. That is not what the Supreme Court has said. That's what the Supreme Court said. Let's stick to him. You won't let us do any work because we don't have 90 plus or whatever. Take this parliament, do whatever you want to do with this parliament. When you are tired, let us know.
Honorable members. Honorable members. Honorable members, I think we will adjourn the House. Honorable members, we will adjourn the House. But before I join the House, I will allow the Deputy Attorney General to lay the paper, then we adjourn. Please.
Speaker.
Leader.
Speaker, you should listen to me.
Leader, let me hear you. Leader, let me hear you.
Speaker, shall we take page 3, item 7, is it B? Item 7B to be laid by the chair.
That's exactly what I said. But I
actually said Attorney General.
So we are not taking the A?
No, we are taking the B.
Very well.
Report of the Finance Committee on Ghana's subscription to 11,996 shares allocated by the International Finance Corporation of the World Bank Group.
Honorable members, the report has been duly presented. It is for distribution to honorable members. Honorable members, I'll take the opportunity to adjourn the House. We don't satisfy Article 102 as well as Article 104. So I'll move on to adjourn the House to tomorrow 10 o'clock in the forenoon. The House stands adjourned.